Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Marianne Kaiser, and I am the CEO of Contrary Collective, a small consultancy group that helps highly regulated industries, primarily healthcare and device, tell stronger stories. And with me, I have Leah and Allison. We'll do quick intros for them, and then we can jump into our plan for today. Leah, I'll pass it to you.
Hi friends, Leigh Householder. My company is House Strategy. I like to say my title's head of the house, but we focus on insight and actionable strategy for life sciences brands. I got my stripes at Syneos Health, but there I worked in innovation, data, insights, and brand launch. And I'm excited to bring all that to a wider variety of clients with a lot of market research and insight built in. And love to work with Allison here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Myers, and I have the pleasure to be working with both Marianne and Leah over the past couple of months and years with Marianne. And what I've been focused on is really helping clients to not just understand what their brand challenge is, but really how do we bring it to market. And we all know that operational challenges and internal sometimes chaos can make that really difficult. And so my job and what I've been doing for the last 20 years is working with those clients to really help identify how we need to go from problem to solution and continue to optimize along the way. And I bring with me experience at Ogilvy, Wrap, some other big holding companies, and more recently, some startups and smaller companies where we've really been focused on early commercialization and launches.
Great. Well, so we're excited to get started. I'll just reiterate the poll results. It's looking like, and we can share these for everybody to see, but alignment and that cross-functional alignment is really one of the biggest challenges for everybody on the call. So we'll jump into it. And one of the things we want to start with is, there's going to be three main sections for this today. So we're getting into what are the right inputs that you want to look at before you get into brand planning? Are you building that plan in a way that will actually move and you'll be able to check things off and get things finalized? And are you thinking about and do you know what strong tactical execution will look like in 2027, especially with a lot of the program changes that have been happening? And so we always know when it comes to working from the right inputs, this can be the first place where problems start. Teams are asked to think strategically, but they might be missing those critical inputs. Or they're, relying too heavily on things that are already inside the building instead of looking out. So I'm excited to hand this over to Leah to bring us in and get started. And so, Leah, I have a question for you.
Sure.
What do you think is the most dangerous tool in brand planning?
Let me see here. I would definitely say this is the most dangerous tool in brand planning. And I'm only using a blank Post-it note because I'm not in a room with a big whiteboard behind me. But I think that this is the most dangerous tool because the place where most strategic brainstorms fail is when we just hand people the blank whiteboard, the blank Post-it note, and a marker. And it happens because no matter how smart the room that you have in the team is, it tends to be a really bad assumption that talented people plus a blank whiteboard with a time constraint are really going to produce the most useful decisions. And the reason for that is that when you do invite people into a room to brainstorm cold, the ideas that tend to come out are the ideas that people already had when they walked in the room. And that's why those first 5 to 10 minutes feel so good. You get moving so fast because that was the preparation work that people have been doing in the hours before or even the months and years before walking into that room. But pretty quickly from there, you move into something that is groupthink maybe dressed up as collaboration. And in those moments, the loudest voices are mistaken for the best ideas. The wall full of sticky notes feels really productive in the moment, but it feels disconnected by the next Tuesday when you're trying to look at it again. And even when those good ideas emerge, they tend to be unhoused. They're floating free from strategy, disconnected from workflows, accountable to really no one. So you're in that like energy leaking situation. I think the good news for the folks on the phone is that it's not a people problem, it's not a potential problem. It's just very much an architecture problem for how you build these brand planning moments.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point. And so, what I'd love to hear a little bit more about there is, if that's the most dangerous tool, how are we going to set it up for the most success, right? How can we pivot that?
Right. Yeah, I think the pivot that we want to make is into more structured engagement. So you're turning that strategic ambiguity that happens when you're all looking at the same whiteboard, turning that ambiguity into durable decisions that come from really useful inputs. So the things that I'm looking for inside the room are to make sure that we have the signals, the right session, and the commitment structure that makes it stick. The signals are a really important thing to talk about because that's what creates all of the inspiration and the context in the room that gets you to durable ideas. So signals, I think I use a lot of words for these when the three of us are working and talking together. Sometimes I call them clues or evidence or examples. But whatever you call them, they're becoming the building blocks of strategy. And those building blocks can be things like external intelligence. So external intelligence would include case studies. You know how much a room like this loves case studies, and they tend to want them to be as close to exactly your problem and your client situation as possible. But really, when you're looking for case studies, you're looking for someone who is staring down the same problem or opportunity. So you can look for those stories inside or outside of healthcare, very close or very far away. Competitive mapping is also a really useful form of external intelligence. Industry trends are one of my favorites. So that's looking outside. You also want to look inside. So those internal intelligence items will be things we're familiar with, like SIs. But also, wouldn't it be great if you could bring in field team observations? What's really happening out there that we should be responding to? It's a great form of clues. Communications audits for what you're doing and the decision driving data connected to it, as well as what your competitors are doing. Any of those signals that are pointing you in a right direction. But beyond the internal intelligence signals, you can also start to look for hypotheses. Throughout the year, everyone who's been working on this business has started to gather new ideas, new hypotheses for what would change. So part of that internal intelligence can be just a moment to collect those hypotheses. And you can do that with hallway interviews, with formal interviews, with ways to pull that out before you get into the structured room that might limit thinking. And then finally, primary research is always optional. I think primary research can be great for creating a really legible view or understanding of your customer. In healthcare, one of the big roadblocks we can run into is thinking of our customer as other. A lot of times the people in the brainstorm room are younger, they're healthy. When you think about a customer who's far away, who's older and sick, it can be harder to think about that person with the same dimension and humanity that you think about the person sitting next to you. So one place primary research becomes a great tool in brand planning is making that person a whole human in the eyes of your team. So external intelligence, internal intelligence, primary research if you can swing it. And then on the far end, as I think we'll talk a little bit about this session itself next, but at the far end, you also want to think about a commitment structure. So all the great ideas that are out there in the world, how do you decide which ones are going to move forward? Not just concepts, not just ideas, but commitments. And that commitment structure sits with you as a strategist too. You have to help the team figure out what's strategically relevant, what's the most valuable to the customer, what's the most feasible. Putting those tools together to make the hard decisions that triangulate that and the accountability and the KPIs behind it, that's the other bookend of brand planning.
Yes, I mean, completely, because we have to make sure we can get it all done. And so I just want to put it out there for everybody in the audience. The chat is open to all of you. And looking at this poll, it looks like we may be a little bit split on if you have or don't have the resources for the best brand planning this year. So my question for you guys, based on what Leah just said, is did something really stand out in what she's talking about that you feel like you hadn't considered? Or is there something that you would want to gather but aren't sure how to? So if you want to talk about that have Leah talk about that a little bit, drop it in the chat. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask her my next question. Um, so, those are all the different elements of how we can do this. But what do you think? I mean, I'm going to address it early, right? The elephant in the room. How does AI fit into this? And where are the strengths and weaknesses for when we're leaning on it within strategy for next year?
Okay, well, if this guy's the most dangerous tool in brand planning, AI might be a close second. But it all depends on how you use it, right? So at the brand planning moment, I think one thing is, and if any of you came to this because you saw us talking about it on LinkedIn, I'd mentioned that one thing about brand planning is it always seems to come up as a surprise every year. Like, we know exactly when this is going to happen, but still when that first calendar invite hits, you're like, it's a race to the finish. So the way that we tend to use AI is to fill that time gap problem. How can I quickly arrange a competitive audit? How can I quickly get my SIs in the language of the company? And I mean, that's a very legitimate way to use AI. We've all done that. But the way that it can become a real partner in brand planning is to use it as a thought partner. You're not going to get every single thing you need out of those brainstorm rooms. You have a lot of work to do on your own. And so setting up any kind of generative conversation that you're having to focus on challenging you, to give that AI a couple of different hats to wear. Imagine you're the customer. Imagine you are my MLR partner. Imagine you're my boss. Get people in the room agents in the room that are able to debate each other and give you that intellectual rigor that you're probably looking for in some of the rooms that you're standing in. And I will say just one other thing about the role of AI as you're thinking about how to take what happened in brand planning out. And you're probably training your AI system at that point. What did we learn about our goals? What did we learn about our voice and our messaging that we want everybody to be able to use similarly? All right, well, all that's going into AI, right? So you all have the same foundation. It's really important as a strategist to think about how you can keep an eye on that, how you can make sure it's calibrated. And this will be the last thing that I share, but I think the best way to think about this is the same way that Van Halen would have thought about it back in the 80s. And this is a story that's been lost in time to marketing that I desperately want to tell you guys. But back then, Van Halen was doing some of the first stadium tours. So they'd come out with all their equipment and their top talent, and they would perform a concert on a field that had a football game on it the day before. So they want to figure out how to make sure it's safe, make sure it works how they think it should. They write this huge rider that goes into every opportunity they have. And in the middle of it, it says, in the green room, there always has to be M&Ms, but no brown M&Ms. Well, isn't that like such a silly prima donna thing to do as a rock band? Except it's not. Because if there were brown M&Ms in the green room, they knew that people hadn't read the rider. And they knew there was a chance that those stages weren't set up to be safe and that their people and equipment wouldn't be safe. So I use brown M&Ms all the time in market research. I ask a question that I know I can go back and look for when I'm talking to AI, something that tells me whether it's calibrated or not. And those are the same kinds of things you're looking for when you take the richness of brand planning and give it to the AI that you're training. What are some things that you can put in there that as a strategy partner, you can keep watching for? If something from one of your partners comes out and it sounds like this, or it has that number in it, I know it's right or I know it's wrong. So Van Halen, Post-it notes, brand planning, let's go.
I love that. I think, well, let me know how we're doing. 2 minutes. Okay, great. Because I have one additional question. I think this could potentially feel to the people that are listening like that's a lot of research to undertake, right? But I think, you and I have talked about this before, and there are ways to tackle it in a streamlined way, in a way that it doesn't feel like, oh, we're gonna really lose a lot of time on this. So can you share some of your favorite tactics for those conversations that can speed things along if necessary?
Speed things along in terms of finding some of this content.
Yeah, so like the different ways you've had conversations and like your unique approach to how you do that to get insights.
Sure. So there was a time in my life where I wrote these big global trend reports about healthcare. I did that for 13 years. And every time I did it, I got that same kind of question, which is how are you going to get all that information out there? And the top two things are one, just talk to people. Um, when we interview people for roles, probably have all been on interview committees where you're all meeting the same colleague and kind of collaborating, aligning on whether or not to go forward. We ask them over and over again, what's your experience? Have you done this exact thing before? Can you hit the ground running? And then we never really talk to them about that experience ever again. So you have all kinds of people on your team who know this industry from different angles, who know this customer from different angles. The first best thing you can do as a strategist is get on a bunch of calendars for half an hour each and just have a conversation about what they're interested in, what framed their view, what they're watching. That's going to get you 70% of the way there. Then you take all the little ... in those conversations, the thing that they couldn't really remember the name of, or they heard something was happening over here. Fireworks. And and you go and you do the end research for that. So I think it comes really quickly if you start paying attention to listening to case studies. You've got a couple publications you like, they're going to start coming to you. You're going to start bookmarking them throughout the year. You have a couple of conversations, you get some gems that pull forward. But finding the evidence or the clues, I don't think it's going to be your challenge. It's going to be in changing the rules of the game. So one other story that I like to tell a lot, it comes from the world of hockey, or it comes from the world of financial consulting, depending on how you look at it. But these two financial analysts, Cliff Asness and Aaron Brown, they thought the entire sport of hockey had been doing something suboptimally for years. And that was when you pull the goalie. If you're hockey fans out there, I know everybody's a soccer fan now, but let's say if you're a hockey fan, you know when they pull the goalie, there's usually 1 minute left in the game and you're down by a goal or two. In doing that, it gives you extra advantage. You have another attacker on the field, but you have the goal open. So you have to be very thoughtful about when to do it. Sort of like we only have one shot at brand planning. So typically they do that at 1 minute. Assis and Brown ran all the numbers and they found if you were down by one goal, you should pull the goalie at 5 minutes and 40 seconds. And if you're down by two, you should pull it at 11 minutes and 40 seconds. And that is heresy. You cannot go into the sport of hockey and say you have to change the way that you're doing this completely. And in a way, that's what you're up against. You can go find the evidence. They went and found the evidence. Your job is to convince people we have to do this a slightly different way. It's worth it to build out a room that's full of inspiration. It's worth it to go through structured exercises that make us think about our customer and our competition in a different way. And it's so worth it to prioritize in a way that helps us understand value, strategy, and feasibility.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Those phone conversations, that's my favorite part of it because people can record phone conversations now. You can use AI to distill it. And it's all in the house, right? Like they're all people that you're already connected to. You're not having to go outside for it. So I
Voice
love
memos is you could also send out your questions and ask for a voice memo back. So that would bring in all of your AI tools that way. I like that one a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, Leah's going to take us away for section 2.
Oh, right. Because now we've got a great brand plan. So we've got to figure out how to make it stick and how to make it go forward. There's another poll that should be coming up on your screen about whether or not you know the stakeholders. So I'll give you a second to answer that. But what we're going to talk about now is even when that plan looks great in the room, when you have that slowdown moment, how do you make sure it's going to work in real world engagements? And Allison's going to come in because she's great at working through these organizations, figuring out the stakeholders, creating elements that stick. So Allison, while these poll results come in, and I'll jump back and give you an update on them here in a second, unless maybe one already came in. Yeah, we'll give them a couple more minutes. So I'd love to start just by asking, how do you map and understand the role of different stakeholders who are ultimately going to impact how this brand strategy is received? How do you bring them along on the journey so that they're advocates on the path?
Yeah, great question, Leah. And it's something that I think is so important because we can, as you said, build these beautiful plans, have a blueprint in mind for how we're going to bring the brand to life. But it really can become a challenge if we don't have the key stakeholders on board. If we have somebody along the way that doesn't necessarily agree with a fundamental component of what we're building. And so it's important to take the time up front to not just map out from an org chart or a title perspective of who's important and who we need to bring along, but really think about those individuals, the power they have, the influence they have, the information that they're going to be able to provide, and that we can incorporate into our thinking along the way, so that we feel like we are bringing the company with us, right? And it can't be groupthink. We can't bring everybody along in a democratic way for decision making. But what we can do is identify advocates and people that we want to be part of the core team. And we bring those people in during brand planning. We can bring it in by bringing in their insights, like you said, making sure that we pull them ahead of time and bring their input into the room, or we can bring some of those people into the room with us. For example, I had recently worked on a launch. We were launching a new therapeutic in an area that this company had not done before. And it was really critical that the people in the room, the marketing team, the medical affairs and regulatory team, and market access understood the current mindset of the clinicians. And we needed to think about that in a way that we would help us get to the end goals, which is, how are we going to start thinking fundamentally about how this therapeutic is going to impact the market? Who are we talking to? What are those barriers? And so we needed to think through and incorporate those individuals along the way, not just in the meeting, but as we started to meet those pivotal milestones in our brand planning development, and ultimately the execution of those plans. So I'd say look out, consider number one, build a RACI, understand who's going to be influencing, who's going to ultimately be the approver, who might be getting in the way of us meeting our goals, but really look out for and bring along those advocates that need to be on board and are going to help us push through to meet our objectives and ultimately be able to get our plans to market.
Well, it looks like we have some poll results that came in while you were talking. So we've got about, looks like maybe a 60-40 split. I was trying to round up those numbers. So I'll say 60-40 split. So the RACI model, thinking through how different people are going to interact, who you want to kind of tag as your advocate, is going to work for that 60% who do know their stakeholders. Any advice for the folks on the line who are looking around, trying to get a sense of who's really influential, maybe who's not maybe as important to get aligned?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think if you are a partner to the commercial team, I think it's really important for those agency partners to talk to the commercial team, talk to the core lead that is initiating and planning for the brand plan and the marketing and the marketing plan, and ask them, who do we need to be thinking about? Do we need, what is the role of the chief marketing officer? Do they have an important say? When do we need to pull them in? In a lot of cases, the CEO is very influential and is going to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to an idea. So how do we pull them in? How do we make sure that we are thinking about their influence, and at what point we bring them into the decision making? So I'd say talk to the client lead. Also, take a run through everybody that we know is typically has a review and approval point along the way in the process, and identify who they are and schedule time with them. Just have a discussion around what we're doing, how we're planning to do it, and get a feel for whether or not it's something they're on board with, any things that could potentially come up as flags along the way. I think building relationships is going to be the number one. So taking the time to really understand who might be involved and how we identify their role through those discussions and ongoing communications throughout the process is going to be the way in for those that don't necessarily know off the top of their head who those key stakeholders are.
Great, makes sense. So let's say you do everything right. You've mapped the stakeholders, you've created the alignments. things are still going to happen. What are some of the, or maybe what's the worst surprise that you can get coming up to brand planning, and how can you avoid it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what happens is you generally know who your stakeholders are. You kind of go through the motions of identifying how you're going to initiate your plan development and going through the approval process. But what I don't think everybody is always considered, and what I've seen not executed in some cases and executed very well in others, is having those touch points along the way that bring people into the conversations. And what that means is not just setting up a concept review to say, let's go to PRC or MLR
Mhm.
and have a conversation about what we're planning, but doing it in a way that it is simple. They understand. I think a lot of times we get caught in our own marketing jargon and our own way of presenting something that we're not necessarily doing it in a way that really um, I think illustrates what we're trying to do and why we're doing it. And that is really, really important for the medical affairs person, for the for legal, for regulatory, to really understand not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it, and use that as an opportunity again to really let them voice what their thoughts are. What do they think we should be doing? And pull that through. We have to show that we're listening. We're not just going in for approval. We're not just going in for a head nod. We're going in for, give us feedback. What are you thinking? What do you think could potentially come in the way as we're building this out? And use them as that sounding board, and then go back to them, show them that you heard, show them that you're working together and you're collaborating and you're incorporating that feedback, because that is ultimately what is going to build trust. It's going to further further build the relationship, and it's going to show them that their perspective, their feedback is truly going to help build the end product, right? And that's how you're going to get advocates. That's how you're going to get cheerleaders who are going to be by your side and being your voice, telling your story internally. The brand, it's not just the brand team that's, and the marketing team that is building something. We're building something, and we are at the very front end of everything that R&D, clinical trials, our operational team, manufacturing. There's 90% of the company is behind what we are trying to represent. So how do we make sure that their hard work is recognized? How do we pull that through? And it is going to be in the conversations we have, the meetings that we bring them into, the way that we incorporate their feedback, and the recognition that we give them. And that is really how you are able to operationalize an idea.
Especially that thought of more than a head nod, that this is the what you're touching is so big and so important. And so just a very last question. I know you want to get into grilling Marianne too. So maybe just a quick thought on how did I want to ask this? I wanted to ask because there are so many big possibilities. How do you calibrate the ambition of what could be with the resources that you actually have at this time of year?
Yeah, that's a great question, because what happens during brand planning is and I say we because I've been on the agency side and trying to help clients build out these really great plans, and we think of it all. We want to help them achieve those KPIs. We want them to be successful. And what does that mean? That means we are coming up with big ideas. We're coming up with big
Mhm.
executional strategies and engagement plans. And what we need to do is help ground that in what is realistic, right? And how do we make sure that we're not just throwing everything out there? Because yes, it would be great to do it all, but really pulling it down into what is ultimately going to be the best return on our investment. And I don't mean throwing together measurement plans and KPIs, although that's important. What I mean is truly, what do we think is going to be able to move the needle in a way that we are going to, at the end of this year or throughout the year, say and look at the response, the result, and be able to share that internally to say what's working and how do we continue to build on that momentum. And it's not going to necessarily be in the big plans that the media team builds. It's not. It's going to be sometimes in just those core tactics that we really hone in on and keep simple in a way that we know our sales team is going to be able to execute, right? I mean, we know that a lot of times marketing is coming up with these ideas, and then we have, there's a consideration for the people, the team that's going to be ultimately bringing those communications to market, but making sure that they are synchronized and collaborating in a way ahead of time that ensures that they are going to be able to take what we have in those collateral, in those messages, and be able to sell it. That's where those conversations are going to be really important. And we need to make sure that we have the right people in the room to be having those conversations. One other thing I'll circle back on is thinking about scale is not just, can you scale up on the agency side, right? It's how do you ensure that that the company is set up for successfully being able to develop, review, provide feedback on those ideas. So having those heart to hearts in a way that we're really thinking through what is feasible. Let's set ourselves up for success, because what I've seen happen is we try to do it all, and then one by one we start peeling it back. And when you start peeling it back, it's not necessarily peeled back in a very in a way that ensures that the most important tactics stay. It's peeled back in a way that a marketer feels they need to start cutting budget, and they're looking at it through one lens when we could be looking at it at the upfront in a very strategic lens, again, of what is going to really help engage our audience and make sure that we are resonating in a way with clinicians and patients that's really going to matter.
All right, very, very helpful. Okay, so here are my results, Allison. I turned my blank Post-it note into a little butterfly that's going to take us into talking with Marianne about what happens in 2027. So let's say we've got the realistic sense, we've met your assignment, we've got the stakeholders aligned. I'll let you start to ask Marianne some questions about what happens next.
Yeah, that sounds great. So Marianne, I have a couple of questions for you. So talk to us a little bit about when you've got your marketing plan, your brand plan, and you are about to start kicking off. And what are the most important components of initiating that process with your team? What are the questions that you're asking, and to ensure that everybody is aligned in a way that you feel like you and your team are set up to successfully begin the creative work and the strategic work that your team is going to be doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I will definitely say we love all of that upfront information that Leah gathers. So getting those insights, getting like the distilled information, the conversations that are really candid about what's working and what's not, that's our favorite time to dig in and where we get into things. And I'll just say, as things are changing, and Leah talked about this, I think the way we talk about healthcare professionals now and patients, right? They're all just consumers. And so when I think about this stuff, what we encourage everybody to do now is really come at the challenges, the unique challenges, in a way that it's consumer forward. So people forward, not necessarily getting into those. Like, I think back to my early career, we did millions and millions of 11 by 17 concept boards. And then somewhere along the way, COVID hit and it turned into, PowerPoint slides. And they were these static ideas of how we were going to tell the story in some sort of metaphoric way. And we were hoping that the HCPs and the patients would get it. We do market research, and it's very focused on like, tell us what you think of this in a controlled environment instead of out in the wild, where we're competing against consumer brands. And we're looking at everything through the same lens now. Doctors aren't only encountering your product through a sales rep, right? So how are we going to tell that rich and robust story everywhere that we meet them? So that's the one thing I really encourage people to do now, and think about it even more for next year, is how can you tell these stories in a new way? How's your concept moving? How is your brand living in the real world, and what flexibility can you create so that you can use AI to scale things, right? Like, I think people worry about using AI to scale or using unique programs because it's going to break the integrity of the brand. But if you set it up in a strong way that gives you some leeway for that, I think it'll be so much more successful.
Thanks, Marianne. Now, thinking about that, can you talk to us a little bit about one creative tool that you think teams should not be using in 2027?
Oh,
Well, I mean, I definitely think that 11 by 17 concept board is like the first one to go. And then I think the other is like an over reliance on AI for creativity. I heard someone in an interview the other day describe LLMs as a look at the past, which is really true, right? Like it's all built on historic data. And what they said is creativity is an exercise in looking forward into the future. And so I think keeping that in mind, you can use the LLMs, you can use these generative tools, but don't let them dictate the future of your brand. Let the
Mhm.
humans do that. And so I think it's not necessarily not using AI because I'm a huge proponent of AI, but knowing where it fits into the process so that if you are using it as an accelerator, it's not diminishing the worth of what you're doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you talk to us about some new opportunities and approaches that we should be thinking about to help our brands in
I would love
2027 and
to.
beyond?
So I am not a what's it called? Influencer of any kind, but if you haven't tried Gamma, I definitely recommend it. So it's like one of the favorite tools that our team uses to really accelerate brand development. And you can use templates in there that fit to your brand, but it builds beautiful decks really quickly. So once you have those things set, your concept, etc., that's a good way to go. Um, Another thing that you can do is use enhanced tools in Figma. So there's this plugin that's called Weavy, and it helps you take, again, your human inputs and extend to additional formats, create templates. And so I think if you feel like you're looking at your brand and the direction that it's going, and you feel like you're tied to either one agency or one partner to develop all these different assets, look at it again. Find templates through AI, and those are two great examples. If anybody wants more after this, send me a note. And with your specific issue, and I can help you find a tool that'll fit.
That's great. Can you talk to me a little bit about, now that you've got your tools, you've got some new ways that you're going to begin building, how do you pull and ensure that you have the right people in the room to review your work, to really pressure test it against everything that Leah is building in the in the brand plan and the strategy? So it's really, how are you working closely with the strategy team and other key team members to ensure that what you're developing ladders back to where we originally started and what our goals are?
Oh, yes. And this is something, I mean, the three of us have worked on this a lot. Having a strong brief is one of the best places to start because you always have something to ladder back to, and it can feel like such a waste of time, right? It's like really a recap of conversations, and that's what it should be. It shouldn't be anything new, it shouldn't be anything surprising, but it helps anyone else that's coming in level set to where everyone else is. So we always want to start with a strong brief. And then there is, so I do race car driving, and there's this thing that we talk about there where slow in is fast out sometimes. So you don't want to go so fast into a corner that you're coming out skidding because you're losing time then. And so we try to phase everything out in a really clear way with legal, with clients. So having those conversations early before you get too far down the development phase, talking about concepts, talking about what you can and can't do. Um, and really, it was a while back now in my career, we wanted to do a concept using a real patient in oncology. But we wanted it to be, the raw uncomfortableness of what the patients went through. And there was a lot of pushback on that. But we talked to legal early and we found a way to sort of smooth out some of those rough edges. And it ended up being very successful. But I think if we had gone in too fast, with a finalized concept there. And to your point, you said we're not going in for a check the box, right? Like we're coming in for a conversation. And so going in for that conversation makes them feel part of it, helps the buy-in, and they become a supporter of those things instead of a roadblock. And so I think those are our favorite ways to approach it because then it's smooth sailing after that.
Yeah, exactly. It's teamwork, right? And making sure that everybody feels like they are on your team and you want them on your team,
Mhm.
then everybody's, you know, pulling in the same direction. And that's all we want, right? Is everybody helping to move us along and ultimately supporting the brand in a way that everybody's hard work is paid off.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
we're seeing in the poll that everyone says that
Mhm.
AI is going to be an accelerator for their brand planning next year. So if anyone's willing in the chat, I would love to hear one thing that you're planning to do with it that'll help you accelerate. But the chat's been really quiet. So if you don't want to share, that's okay. But that's just something I would personally love to know more about. Sorry, Allison.
no, that's great. I'm just looking to see if anybody's gonna.
Jump in. Yes. Presentation decks, that's a huge one.
Yep.
If you
I
try
say that
Gamma or Claude Design, would love to hear about it.
the structuring your presentation deck, using AI to structure your presentation deck, if you're not watching the chat, is what David just shared with us. I like that because one of the things I try to think about in brand planning, you know, we always walk into the client's strategic objectives. What are the critical things that you need to accomplish as a brand? But I would love for there to be some, these are Leah ideas that aren't in all brand planning, but I would love for there to also be human imperatives. And so one of the great things about having AI help you structure a deck is it helps you think through people's attention spans, the order of information to be able to tell a story but not make people sit through a whole story, the questions that might come up, like AI can do a lot in the human part of it. And so I also kind of think like if you came up with a strategic imperative for the brand and a human imperative for the people, what else would come up? Well, for our physicians, brevity would come up, you know, just endless rigorous editing to get to something they can actually consume in the moments that they have available. Maybe for a particular patient group, it would be different, but I love starting with a presentation deck is a great example. Another Dave on the call was using it to analyze primary research data, which knowing Dave, he either has a very cool bespoke system or he's probably on Cloud. But yeah, another really great example, just to take when you feel overwhelmed by the vast amount of things out there, you can quickly turn AI into just a little bit of a host or a concierge for you of some of the data that you have out there.
Well, and I've loved it for data. So I used to use a platform. We haven't used it in a while, but it did polling and the way that it would then analyze it afterwards, you could see so many different crosscuts quickly. That would be really hard for a human analyst to dig into and find. So I think that's a really great use of AI as well.
And Sam threw in the competitive overview quickly, which is nice. And you can also think through your prompts for the competitive overview to have it be a person sitting in your patient's shoes. So not just what are my competitors doing, but what is someone who looks like my customer seeing on this topic from a variety of different sources. So you can do a typical competitive overview, or you can kind of do a day in the life competitive overview, which is interesting. Looks like we got another one there. You guys want to
Yep.
read through that?
Yeah. So Richard says solicit and assess customer insights. Love that. Journey mining, lived customer journey, not preferred brand journey. And then contrary positions. What should we stop doing? Where are we missing obvious and risky gravitational pull or familiar thinking? Yeah, I think that's a really great one. And then synthetics are being considered. Can you share more about that? Synthetic data, you mean?
Oh, synthetic focus groups probably too. Yeah. Yeah, that's always so interesting to me that you can Oh, I got a yes on that. So you can create the experience of a focus group using a synthetic panel. So giving them all the demographic and segmentation of your customer group and asking a question to it. And it works, with different levels of fidelity, depending on how precise that you're able to be, depending on how much data on that group is available. If you're getting started in synthetic focus groups, one great place to start is with KOLs. Because KOLs have so much information published out there. If you can find someone with a deep publishing history, AI is going to be much better able to guess their answer to the next question. Also, a really great thing to do in the brand planning moment is think about what customer research you're going to need for the year ahead and plan some of that market research in a way that it will fuel your synthetic work. So there are changes you can make to discussion guides. There are queries you can do that will actually help feed a person's profile or like a synthetic customer that'll make that work even harder and longer. So great
Yeah.
one.
The platform that I was talking about that did the AI data analysis, they would do live polling for focus groups, and then they could build digital twins off your actual focus group. So I love that because you could pay for KOL data if you wanted, but then you could continue the conversation, to your point, throughout the year if you want to adjust or build more messages.
Marianne, you just do not appreciate my resourcefulness if you think I'm paying for KOL data. Come with me to PubMed. We'll work it out. All right.
All right. I think, let's see, we have one more question for you, Marianne.
Oh, okay.
Can we talk a little bit now that we've been talking about AI, of course, it was the elephant in the room and we need to talk about it a little bit more, but what are some of the strengths and weaknesses when it comes to communication execution?
So I think, similar to what we were talking about before, the future looking of AI. And so, especially with messaging, always looking back at the messaging and seeing if there are things that have snuck in that are like verbal tics that humans have that we try and eliminate out of our writing, that dilute the message or make it too jargon heavy. So I think those are some of the big ones that we look at. And then building toward the brand persona. So coming up with a strong tone of voice for the brand or whoever we're speaking from, either product or corporate comms, but then feeding that into your AI to make sure that it knows exactly what your own voice should sound like, including those different things that you want to avoid. I think that those are my biggest recommendations. And then from a creative perspective, strong brand guidelines. So by all means, use an AI design program, but make sure your brand guidelines are really strong and really thought out before you do that. And then do an audit every 3 to 6 months and look at things across the board and see if it started to drift. And if you like the drift, solidify it, right? Codify it, make it the new way. And if you don't like it, pull it back. It's okay for a brand to evolve, but make sure you know that you're in charge of the direction it's going. It's not leading you.
I love that phrase, solidify the drift. That is coming away with me. But with just a few minutes left, I'd love to open it up to all of you wonderful people who've been listening to us talk for 50 minutes. If you have questions, pop them in the chat or come off mute and go ahead and share them with us. And what else? Or if there's something that's going to stick with you, the way that solidify the drift is going to stick with me, you can throw that out there too.
You can even come on camera if you want.
Yeah. Well, we got another note from Richard who said, yes, building in the audit based on what's happening and what is emerging keeps annual planning from being an annual weather report. I feel like that one's coming right to you, Marianne, because that's something that you've been talking about. How do you know what to build on? How do you know what to pass on?
Yeah, I love that. It really, we don't want it to be like I'm just gonna say, oh shit moment, right? Like we wanna know what we're doing in advance.
Richard's come on camera. I feel like we might have a little more to hear there.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. David's been great, so that's cool. Tell us a little more, Richard, what you're thinking about in terms of being the annual weather report. It's such a cool statement.
Thank you for everything. Thank you for sharing. There's some great thoughts. People get very stuck on their ideas, and they worked really hard on their ideas, and the agency worked really hard, and the brand worked really hard, and people agreed to everything. So sometimes things that aren't working, we can be too tenacious about and not accept it. Hey, guess what? We found out the wrong way to do this, or this isn't working, or a dynamic appeared in the market. Like we look at the onslaught of GLPs, that market's going to be so dynamic. Being tied to an annual plan that we made in a room over a course of a couple of months, and not being open to saying, when do we think about pivoting? When do we think about changing? When do we think about abandoning? Can keep you stuck in something that simply isn't working as well as it should be.
And that idea that something can be just a learn-worthy experiment, I think is really important. You can be tenacious about the learning agenda without necessarily being tenacious about that activity going on forever. Gilead used to be really great at this. They would have a kind of a marketing summit. I believe it was every quarter, might have only been twice a year. And the goal was for the marketing teams to read out what they'd learned from different campaigns that were in flux. But sometimes the lesson was what didn't work. And what a thing to scale. We did all this work to find out what didn't work. You all should know that before you start to try it again. And I think that having a learning agenda in your brand plan is a great way to let those experimenters feel like they were heard, and not get yourself stuck in it forever. Great thought.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier in the chat, I think voice of customer is not regular and frequent enough. Sometimes it's focus groups and it's market research, and it's all wonderful, or sometimes it's overly reliant on operational metrics. What did they click, visit, view, download, attend, speak with, versus gathering customer sentiment on a more regular basis across channels and how it evolves. And other industries are really good at this. Hospitality is really good at it. Retail is really good at it. Health in general, life sciences, not so much.
Yeah. Well, that's the best place to find out what they think is them, right? Like we can just ask them. Oh, we've got.
Yeah, and get another question.
I don't have a question, but I'm just piggybacking off of what Richard said. But I think like we don't really have enough, let's say, call it stopgaps leading up to brand planning. I feel like on the agency side, and it's pretty accurate, it's always a scramble. It's a dreaded time of the year. Like no one's really looking forward to it. And I feel like it's playing catch up. And I think some of the things that we could do to improve that process is like, really check in on the performance of everything that we've been doing, like this, the past prior year, like what's working, what's not working, talking about what should we move forward with, what should we stop doing, and really think about those ideas as we go forward so we can have that basis of, again, how is our audience responding? And then how can we project that into the future of our plans?
Yeah, definitely. That's such a strange feeling, isn't it? That this is the time of year where you get to do some of your best work, something that's going to set the agenda for the rest of your work. And yet there is a dread moment with it. So I love the thought of backing milestones up from it. Like when are you going to have the decision driving data to know what's working? When are you going to start to collect the clues? And you almost have to do that at the end of brand planning this year for next year.
Yeah. And it's being proactive throughout the year versus like, okay, it's brand planning season now. We're just like, I feel like it's a scramble. And that's why, and to your point, this is where like a lot of creativity can really come about. We're presenting big ideas. We're trying to present a plan, an ecosystem. So really thinking, checking in along the way. And because we're on the agency side, maybe we don't always get privy or access to that information, but that's something that we should, work with our account leads to really figure out ways that we can do that to improve the process and ultimately what's best for the brand.
Well, and strategy shouldn't be static, right? Like I think there's
Right.
sometimes this idea, well, we have the strategy. It's like, well, that was the strategy a couple months ago. This is Richard, to your point. Like, is it still working? Or should we just like let's not live and die by what we said months ago?
Right. There's a new GLP-1 that just got a new indication for something. I mean, that could like turn everything upside down, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad we had an opportunity to see some faces and have some dialogue here. This was fun. If anybody would like to continue chatting, we are going to offer some complimentary 45-minute sessions, and we would love to continue talking and maybe even throwing out some specific challenges that you're facing as you begin brand planning and coming up with some good ideas together. So if you're interested, please grab time on the calendar. I think we're going to post it here, and then we can also follow up with the link after today's call.
All
It was
right.
so great to have you all here. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day. All right.
All
All
right.
right,
Thank you.
thank
Bye for
you.
now.